name's Luke Perry, and I have various different jobs. One of them is running Mustard and Green Chain Shop in Cradley Heath, and what we do here is we demonstrate chain making in its original form with a fire and an anvil and a hammer to anyone that wants to come along on the second Sunday of the month from April to October. So what happens really is that we get loads of people in, especially sort of old chain makers, people whose relatives were born here. There's a lot of history going back a long way, and people are fascinated to sort of see it and the smell of it as well. And people often say, "Oh, that's hot, isn't it?" Yep, yes, it is hot. And that's the idea really. And the gist really, the whole thing is just how real it is. I think for a lot of people, chain making and metalwork and coal mining, those sorts of things are a distant part of our history. And so this is something which is very smelly, hot, burny, it feels a bit dangerous, but it's very real. And so I like that to be something that's very accessible and free for people to come along. So we were right at the heart of Cradley Heath here, and it's just lovely to be able to let kids have a go at something that their great-great-grandparents, maybe even their parents would have done for a job. So yeah, that's I think what the joy is of this particular place. And it's in such a pretty area, so between here and Sandwell is a really lovely sort of walk through, and you can walk all up to Cradley Heath as well. We're not far from the train station. And so myself and my wife curate this as volunteers, and as well as that, my other sort of job is as a public monument sculptor. And the works that I try to work with are, or the works that I try to do, are pieces about underrepresented people and subjects. So you often find that in an area there might be a great sort of sense of history of something, and public art is essentially a really efficient punctuation. So what I'll do is I'll go into an area like Cradley Heath or, for example, Smethwick, where I've got two pieces of artwork, and you talk to people about how they identify with themselves, the things that they think are important, that they don't want to be forgotten, and you create a piece of work which is the distilled version of that, and it's an iconic piece that's built to last sort of indefinitely really, that is the boiled down version of that identity. And it hopefully brings a great sense of pride to a place, but also when people feel like the Lady Chainmaker's monument there in Cradley, when people feel as though there's been some commemoration or some sort of marker of that past, they can move on. It's a really useful and practical way to put a focal point in a community, but also at the same time to give people that closure on a history that is no longer there, but is a very relevant part of the current life that we live. Every community is built around its past, really, and you can learn a lot from that. The things that I did, sort of example in Smethwick over there was the Lines of the Great War sculpture, which is about the importance of the undivided India and their troops during the First World War, because a huge amount of people from what was undivided India now is lots of other countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, they contributed hugely to this country's past and are contributing, their descendants, their heritage is contributing massively to its future and the present country. But there was no acknowledgement of that at all. There's no names on the war memorials in this country, and there were no sculptures or any sort of marker to say what this contribution was of over 1 million men sent forward to the First World War, and all those families that they left behind and the finances it took to do that. But there was no marker of that. And so this is the first one in the whole of the UK in the public scene that was to a dedicated piece about the Indian contribution to the First World War. And that was huge, and the response about that was international. And it's all in Sandwell, all of these things happening in Sandwell. Sandwell has also always been this absolute hotbed of stuff happening, and that can be anything from civil rights, with things like the Lady Chainmaker strike, and that being the first industrial action to establish a minimum wage, through to we had just here in Cradley Heath as well, the first black minister in the UK. We had over sort of in Smethwick that the sort of the first monument to in the Indian Army, and just there's loads of stuff like that, and you find it more and more how this small area has been so jam-packed with people that are so diverse that they've actually sorted out issues without ever really having any fame about it, but it just gets done. And that's why I love this area really, is because stuff happens here and it can be huge, but people are still very humble about it.